Go. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Felipe Milicio, and you're listening to the Total Bases podcast. And with me is Austin Spiro. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Unlike most other people, I'm pretty satisfied that the Astros won the World Series. I think it was the right contender. And happy that Dusty Baker, after 50 years in the game, finally got his first championship. So congrats to the Astros. Congrats to Dusty Baker.
Is that for real that he's never even won it as a player? Because I know he's never won it as a manager.
He won it as a player.
There you go.
He won it as a player in the 60s with the Dodgers, if I remember correctly.
That sounds about right. Because the Dodgers were a juggernaut back in those days. I'm actually going to go into his page right now. And you know what? No. I don't think he won one. Let's see. He started out with the Braves. This is the same Dusty Baker, right? Yeah, it has to be. He started out with the Braves, didn't win anything there. He did see Henry hit his 715th home run. Then he went to the Dodgers. He did make it to a couple of World Series with
1981
the Yankees. And there it is, the 81 World Series. You're right about that. Okay.
So I was 20 years ahead, but he did win it with the Dodgers.
The Dodgers as a 32-year-old. I think he was a bench player. No, he got his 400 at bats. So maybe he was a platoon player of sorts, or just a guy that just could play all outfield positions and on a semi-regular, consistent basis. Then he went to the Giants and then the A's, and then he became the Giants manager in the early 90s, if I remember correctly, trying to figure out how do I get from his player page, there it is, to the managerial page, and there it is, 1993, where that's where it all started. I mean, the show wasn't supposed to start out with a Dusty Baker overview on things, but here we are, doing a Dusty Baker overview. So from there, from a player, about 4 or 5 years later, he became the San Francisco Giants manager, where he had that team rolling throughout the 93 season. That was the first year that Barry Bonds made his way over to San Francisco, and it paid off dividends for them. And they won 103 games. And unfortunately, Austin, back in those days, 103 wins does not get you far, because nipping at their heels the entire time in the West Division in 1993 was Western Division powerhouse, the Atlanta Braves. Let that sink in. The Western Division powerhouse, Atlanta Braves. And this would be the last year that they would only do the two divisions and only have the two playoff teams from each division of each league make the playoffs. So that year at 93, it would have been the Giants and Phillies. So we're maybe a win away, or maybe 2 wins away, from watching Dusty Baker against the Phillies. Almost 20 years later, 30 years later now? Holy crap. Yeah, almost 30 years later, we got Dusty Baker against the Phillies. So it's a lot of, you saw it last night. We saw that Baker's first managerial game was against the Cardinals, and the leadoff hitter for the Cardinals was Geronimo Pena. And now Dusty Baker is managing Geronimo's son, Jeremy Pena, for the Houston Astros. So a lot of these baseball boomerang effects or parallels, or however the hell you want to frame it or call it. But yes, we are a few games away from seeing the Giants and Phillies in 1993 from facing in the National League Championship Series. How wild is that?
The amount of boomerang when it comes to Dusty Baker is crazy. I think the other one that I saw was Dusty Baker managed both teams that are the only teams in World Series to have a 5-run lead in a World Series game and lose it.
Yeah.
So it's bananas. And I guess when you spend this long in the league, you're going to have all of these different boomerang effects, I would guess, especially with like managing players and their sons and stuff like that. So, yeah, it is wild that how many boomerang effects that Dusty Baker actually has.
Yeah. And that would be the start of Dusty Baker can't win. Dusty Baker can't win the big one. He's a choker. He mismanages. He's given these talented teams and can't do anything with them. That's where it started, right off the bat, right off in his managerial career. He lost a big lead to the Atlanta Braves. And come on, it's the Atlanta Braves. Maddox, that was also Maddox's first year as a Brave. Remember that? He signed as a big free agent for Atlanta. John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, David Justice, if I remember correctly. And I don't think we got Chipper Jones. I think he got hurt that year. I don't think he would debut until 95 if memory serves me correctly. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
95 is correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. But from there, I mean, and it got worse for Dusty. He followed up a 100 win season with 3 consecutive losing seasons. And that was after they did the split, so it became from just East versus West to East, Central, and West, and that is how the wild card era started with Dusty Baker with 3 consecutive losing seasons until 1997, and in 98, 99, and then from there on there would be consistent winners there. I'm pretty sure a lot of it had to do with Barry Bonds, right?
Right, for sure. I mean, Barry Bonds is a big catalyst of that. I mean, in 1993, you have Barry Bonds hitting 6th. So, little did he know that, there was good things to come. That original 1993 Dodgers team, you have Kurt Manwaring, Will Clark, Robbie Thompson, Royce Clayton, Matt Williams, and then Barry Bonds hitting 6th, and then Darren Lewis and Willie McGee. I don't know. Now you think of
Austin, he's not batting 6th. He's just listed as the 6th hitter, because they go catcher, first base, second base, shortstop, third base.
Oh, they do. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way.
Because I remember him batting either 3rd or 4th consistently, but it's been so long, memory is not serving me right. But I mean, that's not a bad team either. Like no. Kurt Manwaring was a respectable catcher back in those days, at least defensively. Will the Thrill Clark. He basically led the Giants in '89 to the World Series. They didn't win, but they still led it. Robbie Thompson was always a guy, if he could just stay healthy, kind of player. Royce Clayton was a defensive stalwart at shortstop, and Matt Williams would be an MVP contender himself. But I mean, we're seeing a lot of those guys. Will Clark decline. Thompson always hurt. Matt Williams started to get always hurt. Darren Lewis would also miss a lot of games, and Darren Lewis was a guy who was also a defensive stalwart at center field as well. So I mean, they were locked in defensively up the middle, it seemed like, the Giants. And then Willie McGee was the old wily veteran for that team. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of injuries would face Dusty Baker during his Giants era, tenure, I should say. But eventually he would lead that team to the World Series in 2002, and goes full circle to what you mentioned, as I wish good morning to Melvin Lopez, who's tuning in right now. But Baker would eventually make it to the World Series. But you mentioned it always goes full circle. This boomerang effect that only 2 teams have blown 5-0 leads, right? Is that what it was? And Dusty Baker was the one who was managing both those teams.
Yeah, the other one is the 2002 Giants.
Yeah, and you were happy about that one, weren't you?
I was very happy about that. And
then from there, Cub fans, he said, you know what? After 10 seasons, I'm done with the Giants. Let's go to Chicago and see if I can kind of reverse the curse over there. He almost did. 2003, the Cubs make it to the National League Championship Series against the Florida Marlins, and then disaster struck, and the Cubs. You know what? I don't want to talk about 2003. It just hurts too much. I'm wearing my Cubs hat today, so it's hurting too much. And then 2004 was actually a better year for the Cubs. I don't think they made the playoffs. No, they did not. They did not make the playoffs. They finished in 3rd in that in 2004. 2005 was a meltdown year, and then 2006 it all blew away. But yeah, unfortunately, Baker got the reputation here in Chicago as being a guy who never held his players accountable, was way too friendly towards the players. The sports radio shows were starting to call him what the hell were they calling him? Something about his jive talk. They were making fun of his jive talk, and it was mostly from the black broadcasters. So it wouldn't have been racist, but guys like Jonathan Hood would make fun of the fact. And I think even Lawrence Holmes would make fun of the fact that he was always jive talking to the media, and they, as members of the media, they did not appreciate that. Dusty Baker was also was a manager.
Funny.
Go ahead.
Which is funny now because everybody was heralding him as the best hire for Houston because of the way he handles the media.
Exactly right. Well, I mean, the way he handles the media is He that's why players love him, man. He's a lightning rod. He puts everything on himself. Like, oh man, oh come on, man, that was all me. That's just, Jose will be fine. Alex will be okay. I just got to do better, man.
Right.
It very smooth, calm way of talking. It's very hard to make him get riled up. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But so and like I said, I just remember when I was like a 20-year-old, when listening to the sports radio, I think the black broadcasters, like the Jonathan Hoods and Lawrence Holmes of the world, would take offense to that because they knew what he was trying to do. And there's a little bit of a cultural notice that they realized there, that what he was trying to do was trying to smooth things over with the media while not holding his players accountable. At least that's the way I remember it. But Baker was manager when Sammy Sosa and Moises Alou went up to the broadcast booth and went after Chip Carey and Steve Stone, because both of those guys were very critical of the team. And that led to Chip Carey and Steve Stone getting fired from the Cubs television broadcast booth. And then the whole thing with Sammy Sosa kind of storming out of the clubhouse with a few games left to go in the 2005 or 2006 season. And again, then this is after the media went after Baker to see what happens. You baby these players, and look at you. They throw temper tantrums, and they're nowhere to be found when you need them the most. And you did this, Dusty. You did this, and even Baker got tired of the act. And this wasn't supposed to be a historical overview on Dusty Baker, but now I can't help it. I'm on his page, and look, 2008, he goes to the Reds, and once again, he's gets off to a bad start. But like I mentioned in the post, my Dusty Baker appreciation post, 3 seasons into it, he brings the Reds into the playoffs in 2010. The rest of his tenure wouldn't be too kind to him. They would only make the playoffs in 2012, and they would have a winning season. Oh, okay. Made the playoffs in 2012 and 2013. So yeah, the Reds were a laughingstock at that point. And three of those seasons that Baker was with the Reds as a manager from 2008 to 2013, Baker brings those Reds teams into the playoffs. So
right.
So it can't be. So that's just further proves to my point that Baker is just someone that knows how to get the best out of his players. But let's before we move on to the Nationals, let's look at all the negatives that we got. Go ahead.
One thing that I want to talk about with Dusty Baker, and you're talking about bringing out the best in his players. When you look at the original season, his 2003 season with the Cubs, the lineup that he had was a 33-year-old Damian Miller, a 35-year-old Eric Karros, 33-year-old Mark Grutzelanek. He's got a young Aramis Ramirez, 36-year-old Moises Alou, a 34-year-old Sammy Sosa. He's got a 36-year-old Kenny Lofton coming off the bench. Like the average age of this 2003 Cubs lineup is over 30. And he took him into the playoffs. You don't see that anymore. You don't see the older teams.
Well, that's because they're not allowed to juice anymore. So, and Lofton, he was acquired in a late season trade. So he was starting in center field almost every day, it seemed like. But that was my next point, was that Baker, all the reputations that Baker has going against him when he took the Astros job, he burns out the pitching staff. He only relies heavily on veterans. He's bad with rookies. He's bad with young players. Boy, that ended up being a myth, wouldn't it? He's bad with young players. Ask Jeremy Pena how he feels about Dusty Baker now. So that he protects his players. He doesn't hold them accountable. All of these negative things toward Dusty Baker that the media has and popular notion. I mean, we saw it on Baseball Life too. All the negative comments towards Dusty Baker when he first got hired. Now everybody forgets about it. But yeah, all of those things just magically erased once you win that World Series. But 2016 and 2017, he took a very talented Nationals team to the playoffs, and he couldn't get them past the first round, unfortunately. And it was actually, I believe it was a former player of his, Dave Martinez. I thought I saw him in the '93 roster for the Giants under Dusty Baker. Dave Martinez would be the one who would eventually win the World Series for the Nationals in 2019 against the Houston Astros. Well, I was gonna say, I mean, that's another talented, loaded team that couldn't win anything, and Dusty Baker tried to put him to take him to that next step, and they couldn't get through. Matter of fact, I think he replaced Matt Williams, right? He replaced Matt Williams with the Nationals.
I believe he did. Yeah, because Matt Williams was a manager when Papelbon was causing all of his problems, and
with Bryce Harper.
with Bryce Harper and all of that. So yeah, I believe it was Dusty Baker after
Can you double check that? Just make sure that we didn't miss that. We didn't
let me
misinform.
check.
Who was the manager in 2015 for the Nationals? But yeah, that'd be crazy that the Baker would follow in the managerial arc in the managerial arc of the Washington Nationals by replacing a former player, and then he himself.
It
Oh
was
my
Matt Murray.
God! How crazy is that? The Nationals are just acquiring all the 93 Giants at this point. What's the was Mike Rizzo a Giants player too under Dusty Baker? So yeah, Matt Williams, who's a former player of Dusty Baker, was fired or quit or whatever. Dusty Baker replaces him, and then Dusty Baker would eventually get replaced by 93 Giants player under Dusty Baker, Dave Martinez, and that's how they won the World Series in 2019. And obviously, the scandal with the Houston Astros allowed for Dusty Baker to get one more chance at managing, because it looked like with the Nationals he was done. But I don't know if you saw the post-game interviews, but Dusty Baker did mention, I just need one more chance, man. I just need one more chance. Just give me one more chance and I'll get the job done. Because you know what he said? He said, because I believe in myself. And that's Dusty in a nutshell, right? Like,
Right.
all the negativity, he that's why people love him in baseball circles, because all the negativity, he just erases it. Just go away. It's nothing but positive feedback, and it's always shining the positives and doing away with the negatives. He doesn't, I mean, and as I mentioned, and I think a lot of people agreed that Dusty Baker getting that Astros job when the trash can stuff and the cheating scandal was in full swing, they couldn't have done a better job of getting a manager than Dusty Baker at that point. Because Dusty does, I mean, he does a, I got to be careful with how I praise him, because I don't want to like turn him to a mythological figure, but he really truly does a great job of shelling that noise out of the clubhouse. Yeah. He's done it everywhere he's gone. The San Francisco, Chicago, Cincinnati, Washington, just shells out all that noise and lets the players focus on baseball. And that's why I mentioned that he was like a lightning rod when it came to the media and controversy, because he'll absorb all that. He will. So we know what happened. Astros won last night. Any last thoughts on Dusty Baker's career, or just the manager, or what he's done with the Astros so far in his tenure here?
I've always really enjoyed Dusty Baker. I enjoyed him on the Reds. I enjoyed him on the Nationals. I was glad that I thought them hiring, or the Astros hiring Dusty Baker, was a smart move. I was really concerned that they weren't going to do that. I thought at that time they needed a Dusty Baker or a Buck Showalter or somebody of that nature. They needed more of a veteran. I thought they were going to go the MLB, norm nowadays and hire a player or a former player who has no managerial experience. Turns out they hired Dusty Baker, which was, like I said, a great hire, and it turns out to be good. Now, some arguments would probably, some naysayers of Dusty Baker would probably say that, he inherited these players. He didn't turn these players into anything. He inherited these players, and that's why he's in the playoffs. But you know what? I mean, even though there's a diminishing role amongst the managers, I really think that the Astros put a lot of responsibility on Dusty Baker to make his decisions. I think he's a good balance now of new school and old school. He does, he looks at the analytics, but he still has that old school gut feeling type of deal.
Right.
And I mean, it's proven in his success. Dating all the way back to his managerial debut in 1993. He has managed in 25 seasons. Jesus. And in 25 seasons he's managed, and in I just counted, I believe it was 15 of those seasons he's either finished first or second in the standings in the regular season. So I mean, this isn't a coincidence here. You can't say that, oh, he just inherited all these good players and that's why they're in the postseason. No, when Dusty Baker's on a team, he is good at getting players to play for him and playing inspired baseball, whether it's for him or for themselves, whatever it is, he's good at figuring it out and getting the best out of these players. And not only is he good at getting the best out of the best players, he's good at getting the best out of all of the players. And it was very evident in this World Series here. You've got the rookie, Jeremy Pena, who's the World Series MVP. When you thought the World Series MVP was going to turn out to be somebody like Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, whatever. No.
Or even one of their pitchers.
Or yeah, even one of their, one of their bullpen pitchers or one of their starting pitchers, Framber Valdez had a great postseason.
It's a deep team. Yeah.
But it was the rookie Jeremy Pena, and it was because he came up in so many clutch moments and hit the ball, hit homers. He was hitting in the clutch. The dude was an integral part in the World Series, win for the Astros. And I think it is a byproduct of the coaching staff and Dusty Baker.
Yeah, and that's some valid points that you bring up there, and that's him in a nutshell. I mean, and again, all the myths about him as well, the negative connotations towards Dusty Baker get erased with that World Series championship. But yeah, I mean, I was going to say 2,100, but no, he's not there yet. 2,093 wins, a 539 win-loss percentage. You just mentioned that stat that they always finish at the top of the standings. That's not, like you mentioned, that's not a coincidence. Talent has a lot to do with it, but come on. I mean, at some point it becomes, I mean, I don't want to trash the previous guy either, AJ Hinch, but because he's in a bad situation in Detroit, but he was brought in because he was supposed to do what he did with the Astros with the young, unproven squad in Detroit, and he's fallen flat on his face. But Dusty Baker, once you get to that point in your career as a manager where you have a winning track record, you're not going to be. You get to choose and you get to pick and choose the job that you want, right? But the winning teams also want you too. So the fact that winning teams constantly wanted Dusty Baker, when a lot of people were saying, no, he's done, he's washed up, he doesn't deserve another chance, he's this, he's that, the other, it speaks volumes towards his resume and his track record and how.
Felipe, you cut out.
Can you hear me now? Oh crap! Okay. Yeah, you look frozen to me.
So let's see.
You look frozen to me, man. It's still recording though, but let's see. Am I having issues with my internet? Oh crap! All right, hey, can you hear me? Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna pause it. Hey, so sorry about that, folks. We had some technical difficulties. So what I was saying about Dusty Baker was that winning teams want a winner, and Dusty Baker is that. He's a winner. That was basically my spiel there. I'd like to do a quick shout out. Good morning to Brad, to Jet, to Angel, Vince Mercandetti. Oh God, he's had an interesting last couple of nights with every Astros fan attacking him left and right, it seems like. And then Melvin has a few comments for us as well. Let's see, Austin. Shout out to Austin, he says, or not, he says, but this is a shout out to Austin. Was happy about the Giants in 2002, and then he took his blanket and napped.
What he's referring to there is in 2002, when the Angels won the World Series, I was 7. So
that's what he meant. Okay, yeah. To this day, though, that 2002 Angels team is still one of my favorite non-Cubs or White Sox teams of all time. So that 2002 Angels team is the reason why I'm an Angels fan. There you go. Yeah, otherwise you would have been a Dodgers or Padres or Diamondbacks fan.
I was originally a Dodger fan. I will say that I was rooting for the Dodgers because they were the Dodgers, and then I watched the 2002 Angels and fell in love with the Darren Airstads and the Troy Glosses and the David Ecksteins and all those guys, and that's all she wrote. Now I've been sad for 20 years.
Yeah, it's been downhill ever since. Melvin continues on. Dusty's feud with Steve Stone is what turned Cubs fandom against him, and yeah, it was a lot of things, but that was basically the big hammer that hit the nail in the coffin of Dusty Baker's time here in Chicago. The last game of 2004 was the incident with Sammy Sosa where he left the ballpark with like 3 or 4 games left in the season. I thought it was later than that, but maybe 2004 sounds about right. A very disappointing Cubs team that again won one more game in 2004 than they did in 2003 and still wasn't good enough to make the playoffs. And Sosa basically took his bags and went home, and yeah, that was a big mess. Even Dusty Baker couldn't do anything to defend them anymore. And again, just like we've been echoing here, Dusty is great getting veterans to play for him. That is what Melvin is saying. So that's Dusty Baker. But enough about Baker. Let's kind of quickly recap. So Sean and I, we did games 1 and 2 last week. So we're gonna go to Game 3 and see what happened there. And obviously the Phillies, they got off to a really, really good start against the Houston Astros. They put up 4 runs in the first 2 innings of Game 3. And, I think Vince put it really well when he said, this is the first game in a very hostile environment against a rabid fan base on a team that was able to steal a win in Houston. So this was the expectation. Lance McCullers had no chance. And then, of course, the Astros get a taste of their own medicine as McCullers was tipping his pitches.
Was he though?
I don't know, man. Or maybe the Phillies got a hold of some video surveillance or something. I don't know, but that's what they were saying.
I was seeing bits and pieces of the game, and what I was seeing was Lance McCullers didn't have a fastball. He could not locate the fastball for the life of him. And so he knew that the fastball isn't his A pitch anyway. The curveball is. I think a lot of people would say that the curveball is probably McCullers' best pitch. He wasn't locating the fastball. So he's like, well, let's just, throw the curveball up there and see if it works. And not only did it not work, he was hanging it down the middle of the plate. You can't be throwing cookies down the middle of the plate when to Bryce Harper and Reese Hoskins and Real Muto and all that. You're going to get crushed. And it was very evident in the first couple innings there. And Bryce Harper went to who was it? Bohm, who hit the home run? I think it was Bohm. He went to Bohm after and whispered something in his ear. And I'm sure he whispered something in his ear saying, you can't locate the fastball, sit on the breaking ball. And Bohm hits a homer. And then I believe it was Stott hit a double. They just kept hammering him because he couldn't locate the fastball. I don't know if it was necessarily he was tipping the pitches. They just knew that he had no fastball. So the only other pitch that he was going to go to was curveball.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm not here to recap all the games like in that detail, but maybe that's part of it. But he didn't show up, and I think there was a lot of criticism that he was left out too much. Like he should have been pulled after maybe the first couple of innings. But everybody swears that by leaving McCullers in there for 4 1/3 innings, that it saved the Astros bullpen from further damage in this series.
That's what I was saying. At first, I was like, you got to get him out of there. This is the World Series. And then the more I got to think about them, the more I was like, you know what? This is actually smart. You're getting, another rest day for that bullpen. Just leave him out there. The game is already a wash. You're down 4-0. You can, you could really tell that the team, they were in a hostile environment and they went in there and you could tell they were not prepared for as hostile of an environment as it is. And they needed to adjust. So this was more of a game where they were adjusting to how hostile the environment is and what they needed to do to perform. So I think that game was very quickly for Dusty Baker became okay, let's just get our bearings again and figure it out. We're not going to try and win this game. So why waste your bullpen on a bullpen game when you have more games to go? And then you have an offense that obviously readjusted itself and became way better.
Now, I was agreeing with that sentiment. I mean, Phillies got off to a 4-0 lead, so I was agreeing with that sentiment. But then you realize who they brought in from their bullpen in the first place to replace McCullers, and that was Jose Urquidy, who probably could have been there to replace him after the 3rd inning or maybe even the 4th inning. But he didn't pull him until the 5th inning. So Urquidy is a starting pitcher. So he's more than capable of pitching 3 or 4 innings for you if you need him to. And he pitched 3 innings in that game anyway. So It makes you wonder. But it's not like the Phillies did any. I'm sorry, the Astros offense didn't get anything done anyway. But I don't know. I was on board. Hey, that's a smart move. But if your option is Jose Urquidy to do mop-up duty, and Jose Urquidy is a more than capable long relief pitcher, I don't know. Maybe you do pull him sooner than later in the hopes that the offense can ignite itself.
Well,
and
see,
you're only down 4-0.
I still, you're only down 4-0 going into the 4th inning. But again, you could tell very early on that the Astros had no offense. So he was going to let McCullers go out as long as they really needed him to at that point. I mean, at some point, you knew he wasn't going to have a long start and he only pitched 4 1/3 innings. So, and he gave up 7 runs. You can't just leave him out there to get rocked every single inning. At some point, it's going to be damaging to his confidence. So, you knew you were going to have to bring in my opinion, I knew they were going to have to bring in Urquidy because he's going to have to mop up for multiple innings. And, he's still trying to rest most of his bullpen, and bringing in Urquidy worked in this sense because he brought in three innings, and then after that, he just brought in Stanek. And so he had the rest of his bullpen available for the next day. I think that was what they.
I mean, if you have Urquidy, and that's my point though. If you have Urquidy on your back pocket, he can gobble up 5 or 6 innings, kind of like the same way that Luis Garcia gobbled up 5 innings in that 18-inning game against the Mariners. So you have that capability out of your bullpen, and you're only down 4-0. I don't know. And before it blew up in the 5th inning for McCullers and the Astros, I don't know. It just seems like maybe 4-0, a 4-0 deficit is better than a 7-0 deficit. This is a pretty resilient Astros offense. I mean, we saw they were down 1-0 in Game 6, and then a half inning later, they turned the tide around, and we'll get to it in a little bit.
Yeah, but 1 inning or 1-0, 4-0 are very, very different. Especially,
I know, but that's what I mean. 1-0 is different than 4-0, but definitely 4-0 is much different than 7-0. I think getting back in the game after 4-0 is much better than 7-0 halfway through the game. I mean, halfway through the game, it's already 7-0, and McCullers got rocked and didn't have anything. But you could have just put up Urquidy there for 4 or 5 innings and get yourself in that game. But I don't know. I mean, it's every game is precious in the World Series. So, like, again, at first I agree, but if you have Urquidy in your back pocket, you might as well just use them sooner rather than later. But either way, it ended up being the right move because then they used Ryan Stanek for 2/3 of an inning, and that's the rest. And the other grade A bullpen arms were still ready to go for the next game. But the reason why the Astros bats were silenced was because of a guy that we've been talking about all playoff season this year. Sean and I at least were. And that's Ranger Suarez, who threw for 4 strikeouts, only gave up 1 walk, 5 strong innings, and then you gave way to the rest of the Phillies B team out of the bullpen. So not only did that by not put it this way, by believing that the Astros had no chance in this game, guess who's also well rested for the next game? The Phillies bullpen. They're A guys. So I don't know, man. If the Astros are only down 4-0 after 4 innings before McCullers finally had nothing left to give in the 5th inning, I don't know. Maybe this series would have ended faster because now let's say the Astros put up 2 runs. Well, now you got to strategize a little bit differently, because now you got to preserve a 2-run lead as opposed to a 7-run lead. So, Oh, am I out again?
Okay, so I'm gonna try this again. We're gonna try and host this again. Yeah. So I think really